Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something that, well, it can feel a bit daunting, right? Job interviews. It often feels like you're trying to solve a big puzzle. But here's the thing, a lot of the questions they ask, they come up again and again. So our mission today is to look at some of the most common interview questions. We're going to break them down really simply. We'll figure out what the interviewer really wants to know, and then step by step, show you how to answer clearly using easy examples. Think of this deep dive like having a helpful guide right next to you. We want you to feel ready, maybe even calm, for your next interview.
That's exactly right. And it's not just about memorizing answers. It's really about understanding why they're asking the question in the first place. Because when you get the why, you can give an honest answer that really fits you. And yeah, we'll definitely use clear, simple words and examples that are easy to follow along with.
Okay, let's dive in. We're starting right at the beginning. Those first questions you usually hear. The ones about, well, you and your background. First up, the classic. Tell me about yourself. Seems easy. All right. But a lot of people actually get tripped up by this one. They don't prepare. The interviewer, they don't want your whole life story. Not really. What they're looking for is a short, strong message, something that shows why you are the right person for this job.
It's like your professional introduction, condensed, your elevator pitch almost.
Exactly. So how do you answer it simply? There's a neat idea called the present, past, future framework. Let's break that down. First, the present. Talk a little bit about what you're doing right now. What's your current job? Maybe mention one big thing you did well recently.
Something relevant to the job you're applying for, ideally.
Right. Then you shift past. How did you get here? What previous experience is actually helpful for this new job you want? Again, keep it relevant. And finally, the future. This is key. Explain why you want this specific job at this specific company and why you think you'd be great at it.
It connects everything together.
Let's listen to an example we found. Pay attention to how they cover present, past, and future. Well, I'm currently an account executive at Smith, where I handle our top-performing client. Before that, I worked at an agency where I was on 3 different major national healthcare brands. And while I really enjoyed the work that I did, I'd love the chance to dig in much deeper with one specific healthcare company, which is why I'm so excited about this opportunity with Metro Health Center.
Okay, see how that works. They start with the present account executive at Smith. Clear. Then the past, but related past, worked at an agency, healthcare brands. Shows experience in the field. And then they tie it all to the future. And this specific job wanting to work deeper with one healthcare company, which is Metro Health Center. It's like building a little bridge. From where you were to where you are to where you want to go with them.
That's a great way to put it. Building a bridge. Now, sometimes you get a slightly different version. Walk me through your resume.
Yeah.
It sounds similar to tell me about yourself, but this one, well, it focuses a bit more directly on your job history.
Yeah, is asking for the story behind the bullet points on the paper.
Exactly. You're telling the story of your career path. Often, you might go from oldest relevant job to newest. But the goal is always the same. Show how your past experiences have prepared you for this particular job. You could go chronologically, like you said, starting from the beginning and moving forward. Or you could do it like the present, past, future thing again. Start with your current job, explain how you got there, and then what's next.
The key is choosing the parts that matter most for the job you're interviewing for. You don't need to talk about every single thing on the resume.
Right. Be selective. And always finish by linking your past and present to why this role makes sense as your next step. We have a more detailed example for this one. It's a bit longer, but listen to how this person connects different experiences. Well, as you can see from my resume, I took a bit of a winding road to get to where I am today. In college, I double majored in chemistry and communications. I found early on that working in a lab all day wasn't for me, and at some point I realized I looked forward to the lab class I TA'd the most. So when I graduated, I found a job in sales for a consumer healthcare products company, where I drew on my teaching experience and learned even more about tailoring your message and explaining complex health concepts to people without a science background. Then I moved into a sales training role at a massive company where I was responsible for teaching recent graduates the basics of selling. My trainees on average had more deals closed in their first quarter than any of the other trainers' cohorts. Plus, I got so much satisfaction from finding the right way to train each new hire and watching them progress and succeed. It reminded me of my time as a TA in college. That's when I started taking night classes to earn my chemistry teaching certificate. I left my full-time job last year to complete my student teaching at PS, 118 in Manhattan, and over the summer, I worked for a science camp. teaching kids from the ages of 10 to 12 about basic chemistry concepts and best practices for safe experiments. Now I'm excited to find my first full-time teaching job, and your district is my top choice. The low student-to-teacher ratio will let me take the time to teach each student in the best way for them, which is my favorite part of the job.
Wow. Okay, so that's a great example of someone whose path wasn't, a straight line. They went from chemistry to sales training, and finally to teaching. But notice the common thread they pulled out: explaining complex things, teaching, helping people learn. Even though the jobs were different, they focused on that transferable skill. And they built a story showing how all those steps, even the winding ones, led them directly to wanting this specific teaching job. It makes sense.
It really does. It shows purpose, even in a varied career. Okay, next question. This one seems simple, almost like just checking a box, but it's another chance to show interest. How did you hear about this position?
Right. Don't just say online.
Exactly. If a friend or contact told you about it, definitely mention their name, but then add why that conversation made you interested. What did they say that caught your attention? If you found the company through an article you read or maybe an event, mention that. Shows you're paying attention to them already. Even if you did just find it on a job website, be specific. What part of the job description or the company mission made you stop scrolling and actually apply?
It shows you're not just randomly applying everywhere. You have a reason for applying to this specific role.
Here's a good, concise example. I heard about an opening on the product team through a friend of a friend, Akiko. And since I'm a big fan of your work and have been following you for a while, I decided it would be a great role for me to apply for.
That's short but effective. It names a connection, Akiko, which adds a little credibility. But the key part is, I'm a big fan of your work and have been following you for a while. That shows genuine, pre-existing interest. It connects that interest directly to applying for the role. It's much stronger than just saying, Akiko told me.
Definitely. It turns a simple question into another positive point for you. All right, let's shift gears a bit. Now we're getting into questions about why you're interested in this specific place and this specific job. This is where the interviewer really wants to see if you've done your homework and if you genuinely care.
Yeah, they want to know you're not just looking for any job, but you want this job at this company.
Precisely. So the first big one here is, why do you want to work at this company? And like you said, a generic answer just won't cut it. Saying you're a great company isn't enough. They want specifics. What about this company appeals to you?
You need to show you've done some research.
Absolutely. Find something unique. Maybe it's their company mission or values. Maybe it's a specific product they make that you admire. You could talk about how you've seen the company grow or innovate. Maybe mention their future plans if you know them, and how you could help them achieve those plans. Or even mention if you've had good interactions with people who already work there. The key is, be specific. Your answer should only fit this company.
If you could give the same answer in an interview at their competitor, it's probably not specific enough.
Good point. Let's hear an example where the person clearly did their research. I saw on the Muse that you were also hiring for new positions on the West Coast to support your new operations there. I did some more reading about the new data center you're building there, and that excites me, as I know this means there will be opportunities to train new teammates. I also learned through a Wall Street Journal article that you're expanding in Mexico as well. I speak Spanish fluently and would be eager to step up and help liaise whenever necessary.
Okay, that is impressive research. They mentioned specific things. New West Coast hiring, the data center, the expansion into Mexico. Sourced from the Muse and the Wall Street Journal shows they dug deeper. But the best part? They didn't just list facts. They connected their own skills speaking Spanish directly to the company's plan, offering to help liaise. Liaise just means help communicate or connect people. That shows they're not just interested, they're already thinking about how they can contribute to the company's future. That's really powerful.
It really is. It shows initiative. Now, closely related, but slightly different focus. Why do you want this job? This one is less about the company overall and more about the actual role itself. What about the day-to-day tasks excites you?
Right. What is it about doing this work that appeals to you?
Exactly. So for this one, start by talking about the tasks. What parts of the job description sound interesting or challenging in a good way? Maybe you love solving the kinds of problems this role tackles. Say that. Then connect that to the company again. Why do you want to do this kind of work here? Maybe you believe in their product or their mission. So it's a mix. Excitement about the tasks and belief in the company's context.
Makes sense. You like the what and the where.
Let's look at an example. This is for a social media manager role at a game company. I've always been a fan of Xco's products, and I've spent countless hours playing your games. I know that your focus on unique stories is what drew me and other fans into your games initially and keeps us coming back for more. I've followed XCO on social media for a while, and I've always loved how you have people in different departments interact with users. So I was psyched when I came across this posting for a social media manager with TikTok experience. At my last job, I was responsible for launching our TikTok account and growing it to 10,000 followers in 6 months. Between that experience, my love of gaming, and my deep knowledge of your games and fan base, I know I could make this TikTok account something special and exciting.
That's a fantastic answer. You can feel the real passion, can't you? They're not just saying they like games. They've spent countless hours playing their games. They follow them on social media. That's genuine enthusiasm. Then, boom, they connect it to a specific skill and achievement. Launching and growing a TikTok account, exactly what the job requires. They link their personal passion, love of gaming, knowledge of fan base, with their professional skill, TikTok experience. It's like saying, I love what you do, I understand your audience, and I have the exact skills you need right now.
It's a very convincing combination. Okay, now for maybe the most direct question of all. Why should we hire you? This can feel a bit confrontational, but it's really your big chance to summarize your value. They're asking, what makes you the best choice?
Yeah, this is your moment to really sell yourself confidently but professionally.
You need to hit 3 key things here. First, that you can actually do the job and get great results. Show you have the skills and experience. Second, that you'll fit in well with the team and the company culture. And third, why you're a better choice than the other people applying. What makes you stand out?
And it's not about putting other candidates down. It's about highlighting your unique strengths and how they perfectly match their needs.
Yeah, exactly. Frame yourself as the solution. Here's an example answer that does this really well. I know it's been an exciting time for General Tech growing so much and acquiring several startups, but I also know from experience that it can be challenging for the sales team to understand how new products fit in with the existing ones. It's always easier to sell the product, so the newer stuff can get shortchanged, which can have company-wide ramifications. I have over a decade of experience as a sales trainer, but more importantly, most of those years were working with sales teams that were in the exact same boat Gentech is in now. Growth is wonderful, but only if the rest of the company can keep up. I'm confident I can make sure your sales team is confident and enthusiastic about selling new products by implementing an ongoing sales training curriculum that emphasizes where they sit in a product lineup.
Wow, okay, that person didn't just say, I'm a good sales trainer. They showed they understand a specific problem the company likely faces right now, integrating new products after growth and acquisitions. That shows real insight. Then they offered a direct solution based on their specific past experience working with sales teams in the exact same boat. And they even proposed how they'd solve it, implementing an ongoing sales training curriculum. It positions them not just as qualified, but as someone who understands the company's current challenges and already has a plan to help. That's very smart.
It really is. Very strategic. Okay, let's shift focus now to talking about your skills and qualities, your strengths. So the question is pretty straightforward. What are your strengths? The interviewer wants to know what you're good at, specifically the things that will help you succeed in this job. Just listing words like organized or motivated isn't very convincing, is it?
No, you need proof. Examples make it real.
Right. Pick 1 or 2 strengths that are really important for the job you're interviewing for, and then tell a short story or give a specific example that shows you have that strength. Stories stick in people's minds. This is also a good chance, if there's something important about you that hasn't come up yet, to mention it here.
Yeah, a relevant skill or quality you want to make sure they know about.
Here's a really good example. I'd say one of my greatest strengths is bringing organization to hectic environments and implementing processes to make everyone's lives easier. In my current role as an executive assistant to a CEO, I created new processes for pretty much everything, from scheduling meetings to planning monthly all-hands agendas to preparing for event appearances. Everyone in the company knew how things worked and how long they would take, and the structures helped alleviate stress and set expectations on all sides. I'd be excited to bring that same approach to an operations manager role at a startup, where everything is new and constantly growing and could use just the right amount of structure to keep things running smoothly.
That's great. They picked a clear strength organization and implementing processes. Then they gave a solid example. Creating processes for a CEO, covering scheduling, agendas, events, and they explained the benefit it helped alleviate stress and set expectations. That shows the impact. And the final touch, connecting it directly to the job they want, the operations manager role at a startup, showing they understand the needs of that environment. It ticks all the boxes.
It really does. Very well-rounded answer. Now, let's talk about the flip side, challenges and learning. Because, let's be honest, nobody's perfect.
And interviewers know that. They want to see how you handle difficulties and if you learn from them.
Exactly. Which brings us to the question that makes a lot of people nervous. What are your weaknesses? Okay, deep breath. They're not trying to catch you out usually. They want to know if you're self-aware, if you're honest, and if you're working on improving yourself.
Right. You don't want to say something that's a critical flaw for the job, obviously. Like, if you're applying to be an accountant, don't say your weakness is attention to detail.
No, definitely not. The best approach is to pick something you genuinely struggle with a little bit, but crucially, something you're actively working on. So you mentioned the weakness briefly, and then spend more time talking about how you're addressing it. What steps are you taking to get better?
It shows you take initiative for your own development.
Let's hear an example. It can be difficult for me to gauge when the people I'm working with are overwhelmed or dissatisfied with their workloads. To ensure that I'm not asking too much or too little from my team, we have weekly check-ins. I like to ask if they feel like they're on top of their workload, how I could better support them, whether there's anything they'd like to take on or get rid of, and if they're engaged by what they're doing. Even if the answer is all good, these meetings really lay the groundwork for a good and trusting relationship.
Now, that's a fantastic answer to the weakness question. They identified a real, relatable challenge, especially for managers figuring out team workload and satisfaction. But then they immediately described a very clear, structured solution. The weekly check-ins with specific, thoughtful questions. This shows they're not just aware of the weakness, they've implemented a practical system to manage it. It turns a potential negative into a positive display of leadership and proactive problem solving.
Shows maturity, definitely. Okay, moving from weaknesses to shining moments. What is your greatest professional achievement? This is your chance to really show off a big win, something that proves you can deliver great results.
And again, just saying, I increased sales isn't enough. You need the story.
Exactly. And the best way to tell that story is using the STAR method. We mentioned it briefly before, but let's break it down simply. STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. So S, situation. First, describe the context. What was the problem or challenge? Set the scene quickly. T, task. What was your specific job or goal in that situation? What needed to be done? A, action. This is the important part. What specific steps did you take? What did you do? R, result. Finally, what was the outcome? What good things happened because of your actions? Use numbers if you can.
It gives your achievement structure and makes it easy for the interviewer to follow and understand your impact.
Precisely. Let's listen to an example using STAR. It's about selling energy-efficient streetlights. My greatest accomplishment was when I helped the street lighting company I worked for convince the small town of Bend, Oregon, to convert antiquated street lighting to energy-efficient LED bulbs. My role was created to promote and sell the energy-efficient bulbs, while touting the long-term advantage of reduced energy costs. I had to develop a way to educate city light officials on the value of our energy-efficient bulbs, which was a challenge since our products had an expensive upfront cost compared to less efficient lighting options. I created an information packet and held local community events aimed at city officials and the tax-paying public. There, I was able to demo the company product, answer questions, and evangelize the value of LED bulbs for the long term. It was crucial to have the public on board, and I was able to reach a wide variety of community members with these events. I not only reached my first-year sales goal of $100,000, but I was also able to help us land another contract in a neighboring city. Plus, the community-focused strategy garnered attention from the national media. And I'm proud to say I got a promotion within 1 year to senior sales representative.
Okay, let's break that down with STAR. Situation. Selling expensive new LED lights to a town used to cheaper older ones. Clear challenge. Task. Educate officials and the public on the long-term value to justify the upfront cost. Action. They created info packets, held community events, did demos, answered questions, focused on getting the public involved. Very proactive. Result. This is the impressive part. Hit the $100K sales goal, got another city contract, got national media attention, and got promoted. Multiple positive outcomes clearly linked to their actions. That STAR used perfectly.
It really paints a full picture of success. All right, and another common question in this area is about handling difficulty. Tell me about a challenge or conflict you faced at work and how you dealt with it. Interviewers want to see your problem-solving skills in action, especially when things get tense. How do you handle disagreements calmly and productively?
It's about showing emotional intelligence and resilience, really.
Yes. So be honest about a real challenge,
Yeah.
but don't get bogged down in complaining or too much negative detail. Focus most of your answer on how you fixed it. What steps did you take? And crucially, What did you learn from the whole experience?
Show that you grew from it.
Yes, exactly. Here's an interesting example about implementing workplace training. Funnily enough, last year I was part of a committee that put together a training on conflict intervention in the workplace, and the amount of pushback we got for requiring attendance really put our training to the test. There was one senior staff member in particular who seemed adamant. It takes some careful listening to understand he felt like it wasn't the best use of his time, given the workload he was juggling. I made sure to acknowledge his concern. And then I focused on his direct objection and explained how the training was meant to improve not just the culture of the company, but also the efficiency at which we operated, and that the goal was for the training to make everyone's workload feel lighter. He did eventually attend, and was there when I talked to the whole staff about identifying the root issue of a conflict and addressing that directly without bringing in other issues, which is how I aim to handle any disagreement in the workplace.
That's a really smart handling of conflict. First, they listened carefully to understand the real issue wasn't the training itself, but the person's workload concern. That's key. Then, they acknowledged his feelings, showed empathy, didn't just dismiss him. Then they reframed the training's benefit to address his specific concern, how it could actually help efficiency and lighten workloads. And finally, they shared a clear takeaway lesson about addressing the root issue. It shows composure, good communication, and a focus on solutions.
Definitely a strong example of turning conflict into a positive interaction. Okay, let's move on to questions about how you actually work, your style, your preferences. This helps interviewers see if you'll fit well with their team and how they operate.
It's about cultural fit and also just practical things. Will you be productive and happy in their setup?
Right. So first, what are you looking for in a new position? This is your chance to talk about your goals, but make sure what you say matches what this job actually offers. Be specific about what makes a job satisfying for you.
And link it back to this opportunity.
Yes. Think about the job description. What are the key things they're offering? Mention those as things you want. You can talk about wanting to learn new skills, wanting opportunities to grow, wanting to see the impact of your work. Connect it all back. Let's listen to an example. I've been honing my data analysis skills for a few years now, and first and foremost, I'm looking for a position where I can continue to exercise those skills. Another thing that's important to me is the chance to present my findings and suggestions directly to clients. I'm always very motivated by being able to see the impact of my work on other people. And I'm definitely looking for a position where I can grow, since I hope to take on managerial responsibilities in the future. To sum it up, I'd love a position where I can use my skills to make an impact that I can see with my own eyes. Of course, the position is only part of the equation. Being at a company where I can grow and work towards something I care about matters too. DNF's goal of being at the intersection between data and education inspires me, and I'm really excited about this opportunity.
That's really well put. They clearly state what they want, use data skills, present to clients, see impact, and grow towards management. But the crucial part is linking it to the company. DNF's goal of being at the intersection between data and education inspires me. It shows their personal goals align perfectly with what this specific company and role offer. It's like saying, what I want is exactly what you do. Very effective.
It shows good alignment. Next, what type of work environment do you prefer? The interviewer wants to know if you'll be comfortable and productive in their specific workplace culture. So ideally, your answers should describe an environment that sounds similar to theirs based on your research or what they've told you.
Yeah, you want to show you'd fit in and thrive there.
Talk about what helps you do your best work. Do you like a quiet space for focus? Or do you prefer a busy, collaborative atmosphere? Maybe a mix. Be honest, but try to frame it positively in relation to what you know about them. And this is a great place to turn the question around. Ask them to describe their environment.
Good idea. Makes it a conversation, and you learn more too.
Exactly. Here's an example that does that. I really like the environment in my current position. My manager is a great resource and always willing to help out when I run into an issue, but they trust me to get my work done, so I have a lot of freedom in how I schedule and prioritize, which is very important to me. Everyone has their own cubicle, so it's often pretty quiet to get our work done, but we all get lunch together. And our team has a lot of check-in meetings and communicates frequently via Slack, so we still get a lot of opportunities to bounce ideas off each other. So I like both individual and more collaborative work. How would you describe the mix here?
That's a nicely balanced answer. They value autonomy and trust, but also quiet focus time, own cubicle. But they also value collaboration and team connection. Lunches, check-ins, Slack. Shows flexibility. And Ending with how would you describe the mix here is perfect. It shows genuine interest and invites them to share, making it more of a dialogue.
Definitely a good way to handle it.
Yeah.
Okay, another practical one. How do you stay organized?
Hmm.
This is pretty fundamental. They want to know you can manage your work, meet deadlines, and not cause chaos for everyone else.
They need reassurance you have systems in place.
Right. So don't just say, I'm organized. Explain how. Describe a simple system you use. Maybe it's a specific app, a type of planner, a method for managing emails or tasks, and give a quick example of how your system has helped you or your team stay on track.
Make it concrete.
Let's hear a very detailed example, especially relevant for a social media role. I take pride in my ability to stay organized, and it's really come in handy in my past roles, and especially the social media assistant job I'm in now. First, I keep a really meticulous calendar for each of the platforms I'm responsible for using Hootsuite, which I notice you use here as well. And I try to block off time twice a week to get ahead on creating and slotting in posts. Second, I'm a big fan of Trello, where I have one personal board I use as a to-do list, color-coded by type of task and marked with priority level, and one shared marketing team board that we use to coordinate campaigns launching across social, email, and other channels. We pay very close attention to the news in case we need to pause a campaign. If needed, I tag all the relevant stakeholders on Trello, immediately suspend all scheduled content in Hootsuite, and start a discussion on Slack or suggest a meeting to reassess strategy. Finally, I created a shared folder on Google Drive with subfolders by campaign that I update with one-pagers on goals and strategies, assets, a record of the actual posts deployed, performance analyses, and retros. That way, there's a go-to place for anyone on the team to refer back to past projects, which I've found really helps us learn from every campaign and incorporate those learnings into what we're working on next.
Okay, that person is definitely organized. They gave 3 specific systems: Hootsuite for scheduling, Trello for task management and team coordination, and Google Drive for documentation and learning. And they explained the purpose of each getting ahead, coordinating campaigns, pausing quickly if needed, learning from past work. Mentioning the tools the company uses, Hootsuite, Trello, is also a smart touch. It shows they're ready to hit the ground running. It's a very convincing, detailed answer.
Absolutely. Leave no doubt about their organizational skills. All right, let's move into our next section, looking at questions that might feel a bit more personal or are about your longer-term plans. Interviewers ask these to get a better sense of you as a whole person and see if your goals align with staying at the company.
To see the person behind the resume, essentially.
Exactly. First one, what do you like to do outside of work? They're curious about your personality. What makes you tick when you're not on the clock? It's a chance to show you're a well-rounded person.
And someone who'd be pleasant to work with.
Right. So just be honest about a hobby or interest you genuinely enjoy. Keep it professional, though. You probably don't want to talk about something that sounds like it takes up all your time or energy away from work. Think about hobbies that might subtly show positive traits, like teamwork in sports, creativity in arts, discipline in learning something new.
Yeah, something that paints you in a good light.
Here's a nice example. I'm a huge foodie. My friends and I love trying new restaurants in town as soon as they open. The more unusual, the better. I love discovering new foods and cuisines, and it's also a great activity to share with friends. I try to go out with the same group at least once a week, and it's a fun way to make sure we keep in touch and share experiences, even when we're busy with other things. We even took a trip to New York City and spent each day in a different neighborhood, buying something to share from a few restaurants.
That's a great answer. It's relatable and positive. Being a foodie suggests curiosity, openness to new things, and mentioning sharing with friends, keeping in touch, going on trips together that highlights social skills, valuing relationships, maybe even planning skills. It just makes the person sound engaging and easy to get along with.
Agreed. It adds a nice personal dimension. Now, we need to talk about a tricky and very important situation. Sometimes an interviewer might ask a question that's actually inappropriate or even illegal, like, are you planning on having children?
Right. Questions about family status, age, religion, nationality, those are generally off limits in a job interview in many places.
Exactly. Now, the interviewer might not mean harm, maybe they're just trying to make conversation, but you are not obligated to answer questions like that directly. The best strategy is to gently, politely pivot back to the job. You don't need to get confrontational, just redirect the conversation.
Acknowledge briefly, then shift focus.
Precisely. A good way to do it is something like this example. I'm not quite there yet, but I am very interested in the career paths at your company. Can you tell me more about that?
Perfect. It's polite, doesn't answer the personal question, but immediately brings it back to something professional and relevant career development at their company. It handles an awkward or inappropriate question gracefully and keeps the focus where it should be.
Exactly. Good strategy to have in your back pocket, just in case.
Yeah.
Okay, final question in this personal future section. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Interviewers ask this to see if you have career goals, if you think long-term, and importantly, if this job fits into your plans.
They want to see if you're ambitious, but also realistic, and if you might actually stick around.
Right, so be honest about your goals, but make sure they seem achievable and, ideally, connect to the kind of work you'd be doing there. Think about how this role helps you get closer to those 5-year goals. How will you learn and grow here? It's okay to say you don't have every single step mapped out, but show that this job is an important part of your plan.
Focus on development within the company or field, if possible.
Yes. Here's an example for someone in design. In 5 years, I'd like to be in a position where I know more about my longer-term career aspirations as a designer. I will have gotten experience working for a design agency and know more about the industry overall. I'll have grown my technical skills and learned how to take feedback from clients and incorporate it. And the way your agency is set up, I'll also have gotten the opportunity to design different kinds of deliverables, including websites, branding, and ad campaigns, for different kinds of clients to see where I really feel at home before settling on a focus.
That's a really thoughtful answer. It shows ambition, but it's grounded in learning and gaining experience within that specific type of company, a design agency. They're not saying, I want your job or something unrealistic. They're focused on skill development, client interaction, and figuring out their specialization by trying different things that this agency seems to offer. It makes them sound committed to the field and like they see this job as a valuable step in their growth.
It sounds realistic and motivated. All right, we're nearing the end. Let's cover a few final questions that could be a bit tricky or specific, dealing with things like money, or maybe even strange curveballs.
The ones that can catch you off guard if you're not ready.
Exactly. First up, the big one. What are your salary requirements?
Hmm.
This always feels a bit like walking a tightrope, doesn't it? They need to know if your expectations fit their budget for the role.
And you want to get paid fairly, but you don't want to price yourself out of the job either.
Right. Preparation is key here. Before the interview, you absolutely need to research typical salaries for similar roles in your location with your level of experience. Websites like Glassdoor, LinkedIn Salary, PayScale can help. When you answer, giving a range is often safer than a single number. I'm looking for somewhere between X and Y. Make sure the bottom of your range is something you'd actually be happy with. You could also try to get them to name a number first. Could you tell me the typical salary range for this position? Or you can say you'd prefer to discuss salary after you understand the whole package, benefits, bonus potential, etc.
Shows you're thinking about total compensation, not just the base number.
Yes. Here's an example that does that. Taking into account my experience and Excel certifications, which you mentioned earlier would be very helpful to the team, I'm looking for somewhere between $42,000 and $46,000 annually for this role. But for me, benefits definitely matter as well. Your free on-site gym, the commuter benefits, and other perks could definitely allow me to be a bit flexible with salary.
That's a good approach. They give a clear range, and they justify it by mentioning their relevant skills, Excel certifications, and then they immediately bring in the benefits, showing flexibility and interest in the whole package. It makes them sound reasonable and like they've thought it through.
Definitely. Okay, sometimes you get thrown a real curveball, a brain teaser question like, how many tennis balls can you fit into a limousine?
Haha, yeah. Those seem designed just to see how you react under pressure.
Pretty much. They don't actually care about the exact number. What they want to see is how you think. How do you approach a weird, unexpected problem? So first step, don't panic. Take a breath. It's okay to ask for a moment, or even a pen and paper. Then, just start thinking out loud. How would you try to figure it out? You might say something like, okay, well, first I'd need to estimate the volume of one tennis ball. Then I need to estimate the internal volume of a limousine. Maybe think about length, width, height, minus the seats and stuff. Then divide the limo volume by the ball volume. But wait, the ball's around, so they won't pack perfectly. I'd have to account for wasted space.
Exactly. It's all about showing your logical process. Can you break down a big, weird problem into smaller steps? Can you make reasonable assumptions? Can you talk through your reasoning? That's what they're looking for. Not the answer, but the approach.
Right. Show your work, basically. Another one that pops out, especially for sales roles, but sometimes others too. Sell me this pen.
Ah, yes, the classic sales test.
Again, it's not really about the pen. It's about seeing how you communicate, how you persuade, and if you understand basic sales principles. The biggest mistake is just starting to list features. This pen is blue, it has a clip. Instead, think like a real salesperson. Start by asking them questions. How often do you use a pen? What do you usually use it for? What's important to you in a pen? Comfort, ink quality, looks. Understand their needs first. Then tailor your pitch. Connect the pen's features to their specific needs. Since you mentioned you sign a lot of documents, the smooth, bold ink in this pen makes a really strong impression. And maybe finish with a soft closing like, would you agree this seems like a good fit for your needs?
That's the key difference discovery before pitching. You have to understand the customer's problem or need before you can offer a solution. If they never use a pen, you can't sell them one. This question really tests if you listen first, then connect value. It's about empathy and tailored communication.
Well said, listen first. And finally, the question that nearly every interview ends with. Do you have any questions? This seems like a formality, but it's actually really important.
Crucial. Saying, nope, I think you've covered everything can make you seem uninterested.
Absolutely. You should always have questions ready. Prepare at least 3 or 4 thoughtful ones. Ask about things that show you're genuinely thinking about the role and the company. Questions about the team, the biggest challenges they're facing, the company's goals for the next year, what success looks like in this role. You could even ask the interviewer, what's your favorite part about working here? People often like sharing that. If it's remote, ask about how the team stays connected or how feedback works.
This is your chance to interview them too, remember? It's a two-way street. Your questions show you're serious, you're curious, and you're trying to figure out if this is truly the right place for you. It's your last chance to make a strong, engaged impression.
Couldn't agree more. Don't skip this step. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the main idea is that interview prep isn't just about memorizing answers. It's like preparing for a journey. The more you understand the map and what you need to pack, the less intimidating it feels. We've dug into what interviewers are really asking and given you simple steps and examples to help you answer clearly and confidently.
Yeah, and remembering those key ideas, focusing on the why, using simple language, telling short stories with things like the STAR method, it really can make a huge difference. It helps you put your best foot forward and show them what you're truly capable of.
So the final thought for you, our listener, now that you've got these tools, how are you going to use them? How will you show the world the amazing things you can do? Maybe think about one question we discussed today. Which one will you practice answering first to feel more ready for that next big step? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into navigating job interviews. Keep learning, keep exploring, and go into your next interview with confidence.